consider me as a small Buddhist psychologist today. I think, or rather, ancient psychologist. So we consider like that way. Mind, there are so many variety. Emotions, so many variety. It is useful to know these sort of variety of emotion and mind and their sort of, the system. This mind possibly create this kind of emotion. That emotion, some sort of effect, that kind of emotion. That's, I think, very important. So, I take this opportunity to say, I want really, in normal sort of education field, I think more detailed sort of study about mind, about emotion. Nothing to do with positive and negative. Simply, what's the kind of, because of the system of the emotion. I think useful to study or acquire more knowledge about mind. That, I think, can be useful. These things, only through study, research, you cannot buy. Or supermarket, there are a lot of plenty, very high sort of expensive sort of articles there. But peace of mind or wisdom, you cannot buy. Or you cannot exploit from others' wisdom. Only your own effort. Oh, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Thank you. Thank you, Your Holiness. I neglected to introduce Dr. Thupten Jimba, who is the translator of His Holiness and a great scholar in his own right. I'm sorry. And does anybody in the panel before we move on, have a question for His Holiness relating to what he was just saying? It's a moment to ask a question, if anyone has. Everyone is thinking about their own mind. I guess not. We'll come back to it. So then we'll turn to you, Jody, for a little bluntness, I guess.
In that context, I did find it strange that I was asked to be on this panel of inner peace because I don't really have much, do I, Your Holiness? In fact, once I was speaking somewhere and some woman from the audience asked how such an angry woman could try to be speaking about peace. And I thought about it a lot and thought that it isn't just that I'm an angry human being, it's anger at injustice. It's righteous indignation which fires many of us to want to change the world because of inequality. And so I'm still struggling with meditation and inner peace, and I'm not sure I'll ever work it out, Your Holiness. I'm sorry. But I also reflected on something Shirin said a few minutes ago about what we teach our children. And a few weeks back, I was in Portland, Oregon. I was speaking at a variety of places about working for peace and what it means. And I had the great pleasure to be at a school, Ackerman Middle School, outside of Portland. And it was really awesome to be there because all of the young students had created a peace program. For 10 years, that school had been working on peace for the young students. And I was inspired to hear some of the kids talking about what they wanted to bring to their school. And they talked about the various kinds of violence. And I think to find personal peace, we have to understand violence and think about it. And one of the young girls at the school was talking about the violence of language. And in their school, what they were trying to do was make kids understand that saying mean things to each other was violence. It may not be picking up a weapon or the kinds of violence that we think about, but using language against another is also a form of violence. And learning how not to do that, be mindful of not doing that, how important that is. And it made me think about something that I think about an awful lot and causes me great righteous indignation, bluntness and anger, is the continuum of violence. I think it's too easy for us to try to look at the violence of the other. The violence of war is what we think about an awful lot. I think about the fact that there is a continuum. The continuum of language that is hostile to the other. The creation of the other in order to make oneself or one's people more magnificent. The violence in a family. The violence of a society that allows economic injustice, racial injustice, structural injustice. The violence of tax cuts for the wealthy while ripping apart the middle class. The violence, of course, of armed conflict, and pretending that armed conflict is just, that there is such a thing as just war. That is not so. It is just war. It is not just war. I think that we need to really consider all of those forms of violence, and we've been thinking recently in the Nobel Women's Initiative about trying to launch an effort to deal with rape as a tactic of war, and then thinking about how difficult it is to isolate rape because it really is part of that continuum of men globally seeing women as less. How do you stop rape in war if you have domestic violence where men feel better if they hit their wives or their children? How do we change all of that? That continuum of violence, and where do we place ourselves in it? I think it's a big struggle. Perhaps when we meditate, we can meditate also on where we are in that continuum of violence. One thing that bummed me out big time, and you can, when I'm supposed to shut up, you can, point at me.
Okay.
When I was finished with the young students at Ackerman, and we're now all friends on Friendsbook, or Facebook, or whatever the hell it is. You can friend me, I answer. I was told at the end of an amazing morning with these young people that the school was being closed. The school was being closed. And then I thought again about that violence. The violence of a nation that spends more than 51% of its budget on defense. This country spends more than every other nation in the world combined. And we close the schools of our children, and we close the schools that have been teaching peace for a decade, and instead of teaching peace, such as an organization that we are proud to be part of, which is Peace Jam, which teaches young people, yes, Peace Jam, rock on, that teaches young people that peace is possible, that it's not magic, it's getting up off our collective ass and working to change the world. It's seizing our own power to change the world. I would like us all in this world to stand up, to stop militarism, to cut the budgets of violence and war, and give it back to education. Give it back I'll talk just a couple. Give it back to health care for everyone. My friend Shirin Ebadi had pneumonia here in the United States of America. She had to have treatment. It cost her $11,000. In Great Britain or Canada, she would have been cared for free. And we are supposedly a nation of wealth. I want us to think about that violence of structure. The anti-immigration violence of the south of this country in particular. I keep thinking, hell, my grandmother came from Italy, my other grandmother came from Scotland. The only people who are not immigrants here are the Native Americans, so where do we get off? Let us ponder violence in all its forms and not just think about it as war. Let's reject the history books that glorify this nation through conquest and war. Let's teach our children that yes, human beings can be heroic in war, but there is nothing heroic about war. Nothing. Thank you very much. These are the things that I ponder while His Holiness is meditating on Buddha.
Thank you, Jody. Thank you very much. Does anyone have a question for Jody? Anyone from the panel? Yes, Rabbi Michael.
Jody, I wonder if you would then comment on the supposition that democracy is the path to peace. It seems as if, from all the points you've made, that either we have to acknowledge that this country is not a democracy, or we have to argue that democracies are not a guarantor of peace, given that we're engaged in 3 wars at this very moment, none of which have been approved by our people.
Okay. Question,
Yep.
please.
I think that democracy definitely does not guarantee peace. We could certainly look at history. But I would have to agree with you that contending that this great nation or this nation of great possibility is a full democracy today is a great contention. It's something that I worry about constantly, particularly when the Supreme Court recently decided again to enforce the personhood of the corporation, and that corporations in the United States of America can buy elections, which we all knew they did, but now it is open. I want to know when the Constitution of this great democracy said, "We, the corporations of the United States of America." I'll close with, I know there are movements in this country to ban corporate personhood. I am from the great state of Vermont, the state of Vermont, which has the only socialist senator in our country. God bless Vermont. And my state, and I know other states, are moving to pass legislation to ban corporate personhood. And if that happened in every state in this country, we would be able to stop the buying of elections, and we would be able to begin restoring democracy to our country.
Yes, that's very good. Thank you. Thank you, Jody.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Jody. And please don't worry about your fierce compassion.
Ah,
It's very allowed.
thank you.